Hey there everybody, I'm the Stray Prophet, and today we are going to be having some gameplay of Kallari in Paragon. Now, I have not played Kallari too much at the making of this video or past that, but she is a very interesting character, and I'm going to be going over a little bit more about the items this time around, as well as some of Kallari's kit, because it is quite unique compared to the other characters in Paragon right now. Now, as far as the characters go, Kallari is currently the only jungler that is not as bulky as Feng Mao or Grux or Rampage. So she has a very special spot that requires her to have a little bit more attention when it comes to things like getting leashed at the start of the game with the buff. I was not going Kallari jungle this game. The Gideon actually just wanted to have a red buff to start out in the mid lane, and our Rampage was jungling, but he wanted to start at the blue buff. So we had that going for us there, and it wasn't really going to take too long to leash Gideon for that buff, and we figured it would give him a nice start to his mid lane. With Kallari, I ended up taking my throwing dagger first. Her first ability is actually Shadow Walk, which turns her invisible. It gives anybody near her an audio cue whenever she's nearby, so you can actually hear her whenever she's close, which contributes to a lot of the audio in this game and how it's actually important because it can give you an idea of what's going on. You can hear the footsteps, you can hear people moving around. It's actually really helpful as far as being able to tell where people are. It's even on a higher degree than something like Smite. So we're taking the red buff here, and we are actually, I ended up taking a lot of the damage for that, because I didn't want Gideon to be really low health with a buff, because then he would end up giving it to the other mid lane. And I ended up taking those hits, but it wasn't really that bad to get punched around a little bit by those very lovely alpha content buff creatures. Murdoch is the one who I'm laning with against a steal this time around, so we don't have to worry too much about him getting poked down. And that was a beautiful missed dagger right there. The dagger's probably one of, in my opinion, the most interesting part of Kallari's kit, but also, while being the most versatile, it's also one of the harder ones to hit because it's a little bit harder of a skill shot, and you have to get used to the projectile speed and its fade range. So Steel decides that he's going to ram us here. He's kind of just burning away his mana, trying to keep the lane from getting pushed in too hard. But unfortunately, with myself and Murdoch both pushing the lane that hard, there wasn't much he could do. I decided Murdoch was pretty safe on his own, so I decided that I was going to give mid lane a little bit of love, since there were three people in mid lane and Sparrow already ended up dying, since she went mid lane for some reason that I couldn't really figure out. So Rampage is going in on the Gideon there. Oh no, it is Sparrow. So she goes in on he goes in on Sparrow there, and I try to get a dagger off. I do manage to hit that one, but she's taking a lot of damage, and I'm trying my best to keep from having her take any more. But she keeps going up past her tower and getting hit by those howitzer rockets. And then Rampage decides that he was gonna make some plays. I saw that he had the rock, and I tried to jump in the way, but unfortunately, Sparrow got clocked by it, and that was another kill. Now, with the health that I had and the fact that I had very few potions, there wasn't much that I could do, so I just wanted to pick up that XP and then go back to base. As Kallari, you're going to end up going back to base quite a bit in the early game, just because you don't really have much sustain to keep you going. However, she does have a lot of damage to compensate for the damage she would take. She doesn't have any way to sustain the damage or mitigate it, but she does have ways of making herself very dangerous to those who don't manage to take her out. She's very much somebody who needs to be focused first, and you actually need to have some wards ready to put down preemptively so that when she stealths, you can see her. So as far as items go, I did decide to sell my Harvester's Key and pick up the Executioner's Key, because the Executioner's Key is actually only 2 points, which is great, and it gives some physical penetration, some damage, and some cooldown reduction. And the important thing that I got it for was that extra harvester charge, because the harvesters come up the left and right harvesters come up at 6 minutes. The other harvesters, I believe, come up at 4 minutes, and then the harvester near Orb Prime comes up at 9 minutes. So our Rampage goes in here, and he decides that he was going to get a rock and hit that Rampage, and I managed to help him out here, and we got a nice clean kill on him. He didn't have the mana to jump away, so that was how that song and dance went. As far as left lane went, Murdoch was handling himself really well against Steel, so I wasn't really seeing myself as needed there, because getting a kill on Steel would not only be a lot slower and more difficult to do, but it would also not give as much of a benefit. The reason why I went over to left lane this time is because I was actually going to set the Harvester, because the Harvester it was nearing 6 minutes. I saw that and I was like, well, we can get that Harvester going since Murdoch's had the lane pushed up for the entire game so far. Items. As far as the card system works in Paragon, I have to say that the items and card system are not only really unique, but I think they add a lot of depth that a regular item shop does not necessarily have. Because in a regular item shop, I mean, you can upgrade in League of Legends or Dota, you upgrade something into a more powerful version of itself, or you get pieces that make into something better. But in this one, you start with the quote unquote final product that you would see in League or Dota, and then you just socket it with runes or gems or other cards or whatever you'd like to call them. I think that that's a very interesting concept because then people have similar endgame items. However, they can be runed differently to spec into entirely different things. Something to note about that card system is that say that I got a physical penetration item, like an item that just gives physical penetration. The only runes it would let me try and put into that would be physical penetration runes. You can only put runes in for something that has a stat that the item itself gives you. So sometimes, if you want to get a physical penetration item, because you need a lot of physical penetration, you better make sure that you have all the runes you need in order to socket that out with the physical penetration. Now, for things like, say, the Lord's Key, or the Lord's Ward, the ones that gives health, mana, cooldown reduction, those are very good for being balanced. Kind of like a jack of all trades if you're going to build for that, because, you have access to building all of those stats now. Pendulum of Lords works the same way, because it gives health, mana, cooldown reduction. Now, Howitzer didn't have any mana here, so I decided that I was just going to give him a little bit of a gank, and then Rampage hit him with the Glory Rock there, so that boulder ended up helping us snag yet another kill. I thought I was going to go left lane here, but I leveled up to level 5, and I decided that right lane needed a little bit of help. And even though right lane had been doing really, really well and Gideon was already there, it was also pretty close to 9 minutes, and I wanted to spend a little bit of time going after a gank and maybe setting up a harvester before I try to set up for the Orb Prime harvester. Because since there's an odd number of harvesters, there's 7, that means that you can't have both teams be tied unless one of the harvesters is unclaimed. So at 9 minutes, that's the 7th harvester opened up, and you can just go to your heart's content here. I decided to give this Kallari a little bit of help and show her the meaning of death. Now she ulted, and that hit 2 of us and got Sparrow really low, but then I ulted and managed to execute her with it. Kallari's ultimate does about, I believe it's 400 base damage. And that is physical damage, which means that it will be reduced by armor. However, if they are marked for death, Kallari's passive, which means that if they're under 25% health, you and your entire team can see them wherever they are, even through stealth, then it's definitely something to note, because Kallari's ultimate is extremely helpful at getting those types of kills if her passive happens to be on them. And as far as that goes, I have to say that Kallari is extremely fun for how mobile she is, but she definitely has a lot of problems with being focused. If her stealth if she gets CC'd while she's stealth, the stealth does break. So it actually puts her in a lot of trouble if she goes into stealth and then she gets hit by a rampage rock or she gets hit by a Decker stasis bomb. I saw Rampage go into that invisibility field there, and I was like, I am not going after that then. So I tried to little work my way around a little bit and try and get the drop on Sparrow. And I flipped up here, and then I did not stealth because I had my ultimate. And I didn't want to use up all my mana since Kallari's mana pool is really small. I believe I got Sparrow to retreat here. So I decided that I was going to go mid lane instead. It looks like Howitzer just used his ultimate, so I was like, well, that's one of his only escapes aside from his mine, so I was going to look around and check for any opportunities to get another kill in. Because with Kallari's ultimate, you want to get as many kills as you can with that ult. Well, because it's very good at helping Kallari snowball. Now, she does not. The characters in Paragon do not snowball as hard as they would in something like League, but they do have a lot of potential to if your team doesn't work together to try and stop them. If someone gets a kill, like say for example, the Gideon mid gets a kill on a gadget or a howitzer, it makes it a lot harder for that Gideon to take on that howitzer. So your team will have to devote some resources to helping him catch up. It's not a matter of one kill and the game's out of control. No character in Paragon is currently like that. I don't think Paragon's ever going to be like that. It's much more so if someone is losing in a lane, you have to try and coordinate to give them some help. And I think that that helps a lot if you can actually try and coordinate your team. Teamwork is a part of the game after all. And while it's not as severe as something like Heroes of the Storm, where you're completely out of luck if your team isn't coordinated, I think that it's important. Now, I saw Kallari stealth here, and I decided to use my stealth. I don't know if that's a bug, but right now it seems that if the enemy Kallari stealths and a friendly Kallari stealths, they will actually both be able to see each other. I think that's kind of confusing since usually I've never come across a game to where if two players are stealth, they can automatically see one another if they're in range. And I don't know if that's a bug that they're going to be fixing or if that's something that's actually intended. If it's intended, that makes it very interesting whenever there are two stealthy characters at the same time. But Kallari being the only one with a natural stealth, I think they might still be working on the stealth mechanics because I think it works with wards too. I'm not particularly sure, but I do know that it happens with Kallari. Her Shadow Walk does give, in addition to the invisibility, it gives a maximum move speed buff. So it is very helpful at helping chase people down if they are not in travel mode because it does break your travel mode. However, you can charge up your travel mode while you are invisible. If you are invisible, you can just start charging up the travel mode, but once you go into travel mode, you will break stealth. So sometimes it's very good for giving yourself that extra layer of security so that way you can get away. Another fight's going down in the mid lane here. I do have my ultimate, but I don't have the mana for anything other than my ultimate. And with Rampage going in, I decided that it was a good idea to at least just sit there and try and pick up the kill. And with another ult, I managed to do just that. Even though Gideon didn't manage to get an assist on that, I don't believe, it was still a kill, and that kill did manage to help out the mid lane, even if Gideon didn't get a part of the kill, because it helps Rampage and it helps myself, which allows us to roam more effectively. I'm picking up the Orb Prime Harvester here. Harvesters are always fantastic at keeping things going. And I'm also going to be picking up a Major Wound. Now, usually I don't go for any crit on Kallari, because I have played her a few times and I Figured out that flat damage is usually what works better, but I figured it might give me an edge against the other Kallari, since I thought that that crit might help in a pinch, since Kallari versus Kallari is very much a who can DPS the other person down first. Usually there's not as much juking going on because if you try and stealth, the other Kallari can stealth and see you. Now I saw that the Murdoch ended up dying getting a kill here, so I wanted to pick up that kill experience as well as clear the wave, since minions, as I've said before, in these games do not mess around. They will mess up a tower before you can blink. They are really not to be trifled with. And super minions even more so. You can't just take a wave of them on your own unless you're a really dangerous carry. Again, with the mid lane push, the enemy team seems to be slamming their head against a brick wall with that tactic, but I decided that I was going to try and get that double ult here. It does get quite a bit of nifty damage on Sparrow. I decided to stealth because Sparrow ulted. When her bow turns sideways, she can shoot 3 arrow shots instead of 1, and they all do increased damage, so I decided it was best to retreat out of that. They got the tower, unfortunately, and they continued to push. So I figured that I was gonna. Oh, and there was the other Kallari right there. What I was doing right there is I wanted to make sure that she wasn't going to roam to Murdoch after seeing me, and it looks like she was. So I was gonna try and stop that gank, give a little counter gank action here. Murdoch did get ulted, and there was not much of a chance of him getting out of there. I wanted to try and give him as much peel as possible, so I was body blocking steel to keep him from getting close, and it actually worked. Murdoch got out of there alive instead of, dying a horrible death, because getting ulted by steel and then Kallari, that's a lot of base damage coming out there. I had pretty good health and mana, though I did finish my potion, so I was trying to get some damage off here, but unfortunately I missed the dagger again. And that dagger, it's extremely helpful, especially whenever you're in travel mode and using it against someone. And there goes Murdoch. He decided to stay a little bit too long, and he went up against the Sparrow and lost. But that dagger, like if you're in travel mode and chasing after a ranged character, that would usually just be able to turn around and pop you, and then you're out of travel mode and they can get away. I think that the dagger really helps Kallari compared to other melee characters because she can just toss that dagger at somebody and she can be the one who snares the enemy, which gives her a lot more. And she also has the mobility to close the gap without taking too much direct damage by, having to close the gap to a ranged character. Rampage and Gideon decided they were going to show up now. The tower did go down, but I was trying my best to, with half health and a quarter mana, just trying to tink away at damage. I could have gotten the snare if I would have hit that dagger, but unfortunately I was unable to get it yet again. That dagger is really deceptively hard to hit. Now, I'm at level 8 and card level 15, so I do have 5 points, but I'm also trying to pick up these harvesters. Whenever you see me tab onto the screen, you can see that I have quite a bit of harvester XP, and I did that intentionally just because that harvester XP makes a huge difference. It is a massive difference. You will see that even if a team has more kills, that harvester XP is almost half a kill's worth of card XP. But that's just for you. You give that to your entire team. So if you manage to get a full harvester and get that all to your team, that's around 1,680 XP, which is ridiculous. And that's across the board, of course. So you get about 340 apiece for a full harvester, but a kill is about 880 to 900. And I'm not sure if it goes up with the amount of usage, but I do believe that the harvesters do end up accounting for a lot of that card XP, and keeping control of those, I can't stress how important it is. Just because, I mean, I'm not even fighting Rampage here. I'm choosing to get the harvester and make sure that that's empty over stopping him in the lane. That's also partially due to the fact that Kallari can't dual Rampage. But my harvester point stands. I've seen people who have had 10, 15, 20 more kills than the opposition, but ended up losing because that lower level team kept control of harvesters. If you can keep control of just 4 harvesters and keep them managed and keep them from getting destroyed, you're solid. You're in a good spot. Speaking of harvesters getting destroyed, while I'm just ditzing around here with Rampage, it looks like Howitzer was destroying our left side harvester. Now I was tunneling a little bit here instead of focusing on it, but after it got destroyed, for some reason our team wanted to surrender. I wasn't sure why. But after the harvester got destroyed, I figured that I was going to try and set it up again. Because after a harvester gets destroyed, nothing can be placed there for 30 seconds. Then anybody can place a harvester there normally. So I figured that would be pretty helpful. The Kallari got a little bit caught out here, and the steel was trying to get into the fight, so I decided I was gonna toss a friendly dagger at him and then try and get to the Kallari, but the steel ulted me, and he only got me in his ult, which was a pretty interesting choice of ult, I suppose. I was finding it a little bit difficult to keep up with Steel just because he managed to clip me with that dash of his. And right lane was getting pushed, get it pretty hard by the enemy Sparrow. Now with those 5 points, I decided I was going to pick up Viper Bolt, which is something that gives some, I believe it's critical chance and physical penetration. I decided to pick that up not just for the crit chance, since I already had a major wound, which is 12%, so it gets me up to about 20%, but that physical penetration. Because if you have pure physical penetration, and the carries that aren't really building anything tanky, you manage to do true damage to them. Like for example, I have so much physical penetration right now, this Sparrow can't really handle me. And even though I got caught, I decided to ult straight through, and I got through to the Sparrow. And she didn't have a chance. She was at a third of her health, and she just got cooked. I kind of didn't want to go in here, mainly because my potions weren't really healing me all that much, and Rampage ulted, so it was a little bit of trouble trying to work with that. So I decided to go for the Harvester instead, since the Harvester is Harvesters win games. I don't know if they're going to be changing the Harvesters to any significant degree anytime soon. I know they did change it so you cannot see the enemy's card experience per person, or Harvester experience per person. That would be a little bit crazy. But here, I decided that I was going to go around to Rampage, and I was looking for a way to catch him before he backed, and I actually got him right in range for that dagger. The dagger does apply a bleed, which makes it good against tanks. That bleed does 1% of their maximum health over 5 seconds, so it's not like a super powerful bleed, but it is pretty useful. The bleeds that people like Grux have are a lot more powerful. McClory's bleed definitely helps whenever it comes to trying to damage a tank. And it can give you that little bit of extra damage so that way you can win out a fight. 2 points was unfortunately not enough to get anything in my custom deck because my custom deck had a lot of 3s and quite a few 4s. And even I threw 1 6 in there. The 6 that I had was Siren Song, which is actually pretty cool. It's gives life steal, and if you activate it, you steal 35 move speed on hit for a couple of seconds. I thought that for somebody like Kallari, who can, that even though she has dashes, can sometimes have a little bit of trouble sticking to people, that it might be pretty useful. This is an example of somebody who can hear Kallari, but does not necessarily know what to do with Kallari. Now, she ults here, and I'm really, really not wanting this ult. I am really not, but I don't really have a choice. I'm trying to weave as best as I can, but there wasn't much that I could do. Unfortunately, my second backflip, I wanted to go forward, but it went backward. I'm not sure if that's just because I was accidentally moving that direction, or it just doesn't go forward. But I gave it a try, and I managed to keep her from pushing too far. So that's kind of a win. I'm gonna choose to believe that was kind of a win. Rampage here, if you look, what's clipping into his body is currently the black buff. The black buff is a lot harder to take than the red or blue buff because it's kind of like if I wanted to compare it to something, think of it like Dragon in League of Legends. It's a very powerful camp, but it does not give any global buffs to your team. It more so just gives the person who picks up the black buff a lot of bonus stats. I believe it has like bonus structure damage, which is always useful, and bonus damage, period. So it's kind of like a red buff and some structure damage built in there. And here I am trying to stop another push on the right lane since our team was not pushing well at all. I whiffed my ult, and so did the enemy Kallari. She more so used it to escape. So I was a little bit happy that at least she whiffed her ult, and that made me feel a little bit better about me missing mine. And here I go with the Mad Dagger, but Murdoch decided that he was going to blast her into the next dimension, so I didn't get to banish her to the Shadow Realm. I went back here, and I probably didn't need to, but nobody was defending the left lane, and mid lane was already getting pressured, so I figured left lane needed some assistance. I wasn't really sure what our Gideon was doing, but that's not. I mean, he could have helped, but there's also not really much that he could have done if he would have just been by himself. Because Sparrow is kind of like a mobile turret almost. She has a lot of damage and a lot of ways to deal it. She just has no escapes. So you have to get really mobile with her in order to beat her out there. Sparrow did end up burning her ultimate, but unfortunately I got caught in travel mode just as she got in range to shoot me. So I did get snared, but Rampage came in from behind and managed to distract her just long enough for me to ult through her and pick up that kill. And as far as the items go, the Viper Bolt, like for example, as I said, the statistics that the item gives you on its own are the only types of cards that you'll be able to put on there. Since cards are usually only one statistic, like, this gives you extra energy damage, this gives you extra physical damage. It's pretty simple as far as the cards go right now. But if you have something that gives you attack speed and crit, you can't necessarily put something on there that gives you extra strike, extra physical damage. So you have to kind of plan that out. I did not plan my Kallari custom deck out that well because I actually figured it out in this game. I'm still learning things here and there, though I do think that's a very interesting concept. So without even looking at every single rune that somebody has, you can still manage to see what stats they could build out of it. Now you can see the runes pretty easily, and I think that the UI for the tab menu for seeing your opponent's items is pretty well done so far. They are going to be changing the combat UI, especially in the bottom right, but that's something that I believe is coming with the Sevarog patch, which will be coming out on Tuesday, which I'm very excited for. And Sevarog, if you guys happen to vote for it, will be the next video. Because I think Sevarog's going to be really, really cool. But yes, as far as the items go, you see that Sparrow was seeing me here, and I just kind of had to dodge away. There wasn't really much that I could do because the Rampage jumped behind us and they were all focused on him. But with items, I think that it's very good to focus on a couple of key attributes and I generally don't go for the Jack of all trades. There was a minion stuck there. Since Jack of all trades, I mean, you'll be pretty good in a couple of respects, but you won't be able, if you're a carry, you want to make sure that you can carry. And that requires you building a lot of damage and a lot of whatever stat you think might be able to help you out there. For Kallari and people like Gideon, that's something like the damage attribute they have. For Kallari, it's physical. For Gideon, it's energy, and then health. Because health, even if it's flat health, still helps against bursty champions like Kallari or a Murdoch ult. It's still really helpful. I don't think that health is one of the I don't think it's a poor attribute. I think it's something that's worth investing on some characters. But other characters like, say, carries like Murdoch, Twin Blast, and Sparrow, they have so much to build already to make themselves the most effective damage dealer. They don't have the opportunity to build as much health. They'd have to build health with the damage they were building. And that's why I think Kallari and Gideon make great secondary damage dealers, but they are not fantastic primary damage dealers because Gideon, his crowd control is literally just sucking people closer to him, but it doesn't actually count as hard crowd control. It's more so just slowing enemies and wanting to pull them towards the center, but it doesn't stop the enemy from taking action. And although I believe he has some manner of damage reduction while he's channeling that ultimate, he still is very, very squishy. And if he's literally standing in the same spot for 5 seconds, just channeling his ultimate, you don't want to try and cancel that because you lose your damage reduction. But you also want to make sure that you don't die to the burst that the enemy team that you're pulling in is trying to dish out. Howitzer here was trying to push up, and he got 3-man ganked. I would have counted it as a 4-man, but Murdoch just kind of got there to say good job, guys. And I wanted us to push a lane. I really did because we hadn't taken a tower at all, and they've taken 5 of our towers. We really were not pushing well at the start of this, so I was really focused on trying to get some of that push through. Since if you don't push, I mean, you obviously can't win the game unless the enemy team surrenders if you don't push the lanes and get some towers down. And although we were doing fantastic when it came to things like kills, as far as towers went, we had hardly grazed them. And we haven't been grouping up or split pushing as much as they were. I was doing my best to try and keep their split push under control, but I had to back because I saw that left lane was a little bit in danger. I decided to actually try using travel mode this time instead of waiting to watch the back animation. Even though Kallari's is really really cool. So it looks like the rampage, our rampage was going to the right lane, hopefully to try and push that lane out a little bit. Our mid lane trio was retreating. It looks like they were coming towards the left lane. I was going to try and get the Kallari, but I think that the dagger was just out of range at that point. The the fade animation for the dagger looks very similar to it actually hitting something, like hitting a wall or a barrier of some sort. So it kind of, from the perspective of the person playing Kallari, it's a little bit harder to tell if you actually hit an obstacle or if that's just the end of the range of your dagger. And here we go looking at the wonderful bulk that these minions have. I mean, here I am with 2 fully fleshed out items and an adamant edge, and I'm still having trouble taking these guys out. I know I haven't built full on strike for all these extra hits, but it's still really, really hard to take these minions out unless you have your own minions to back them up. Minions are pretty much good at killing anything, and they're not to be messed around with. There was a fight that went on near the black buff that I was not there for, but I also wanted to make sure our inhibitor didn't get pushed down while we were fighting. So unfortunately, I couldn't make it there, and I mean, really, they shouldn't have engaged if it wasn't much of a fair fight. But we had less people on our team go down than they did on their team, so I guess that was worthwhile. And here I am. I was going to take the red buff here because I figured that it was going to be really helpful. And as you can see with the numbers that are popping up, melee characters do have an AoE whenever they attack. So it's not like, if you attack somebody as a melee character, you're not going to have any chance of cleaving. You cleave on every hit. I'm not sure. I don't think there are hit progressions. There are attack progressions like there are in Smite, to where you attack faster in some respects and do X amount of damage with it. I think it's much more just you cleave on every hit, and they make it really simple there. I'll have to see. Haven't seen anything on attack chain progression, but if there is for melee characters, I think that would be pretty interesting. I think one of the reasons they may not have it is because while melee characters can have attack chain progression, ranged characters don't really need it. That minion was still stuck there. I did not notice that whenever I was playing that for the first time. I would notice that minion was just still there, just chilling in the wall. That's actually pretty neat glitch there. Glitch or bug or what have you. And the enemy team's pushing up middle again. They're just clustering up, trying to get a big push. I wanted to try and wait as much as we could because Gideon wasn't there, but he was actually completely dedicated to pushing left lane. And I didn't know this at the time. I thought that he was just going to try and take the tier 1 and then come back. But no, he was actually dedicated to going all the way through the tier 2. He didn't say anything about going all the way through the tier 2, but he had the determination. I decided to catch the Kallari out here since she was running by, and I got her to retreat. She was trying to flank, but I managed to stop that in its tracks. However, this is a 4v5 as far as, damage here, and even though our rampage went in, we were going on the Sparrow, which is smart, but I wanted to get in and get that ult, but unfortunately I ulted while I was still in the air, and Kallari's hitbox does not have any elevation or very small elevation coverage, it looks like. So that really didn't work that much. And I didn't know that about Kallari until I actually did that. So it was actually pretty helpful to figure out that Kallari's ultimate, if used in the air, is probably not going to be that effective. We lost our right inhibitor. It was not a fun experience, but don't worry, we got a tier. Gideon nabbed that tier 1 tower, so I think we're still off to a good start there. A tier 1 for an inhibitor. That is some beautiful trading. We did end up losing that fight pretty heavily, but they actually lost quite a few people at the end as well because the tower died a bit too hard, especially their enemy rampage. So I spawned, and I was just trying to make sure that the core got taken care of because they already had minions there, since that right inhibitor got taken with pretty much no resistance whatsoever, which was a bit unfortunate, but I decided that I was going to try and push that out as much as I could, since trying to push another lane while an inhibitor is down, especially in this game, is not going to end well. These super minions can take out the core all by themselves, so there's no, if you leave it unattended, the core does not do enough damage to take out these super minions. It just doesn't. These super minions are designed to need at least one person to hold off the lane. And I completely agree with that. I think that it's a great reward for getting an inhibitor, which is why you have to protect those. Because towers are not as bulky as they are in things like League of Legends or Dota. Towers go down easy. They're not gonna give you a break there. These minions will mess you up and mess your towers up. Even though that harvester was pretty much full there, I decided that I was gonna push this minion wave with my ultimate, since I wasn't really fighting anybody at this point, and it's on a minute cooldown now. So I just wanted to get that out of the way so that way I could get that harvester. Because even when you have an inhibitor down, that harvester makes a difference. All the kills in the world can be great, but it helps you keep up to someone if they have more kills, since you can very easily keep track of the experience. You get your team very, very ahead if you manage to get a good grasp on the harvesters and keep your enemies from getting them. Usually, from what I've seen so far, the jungler is the main harvester manager. Though since I was kind of like a secondary jungler at this point, I figured that I was going to help out with those as well. I'm going back here because I wanted to get another rune for my Adamant Edge. That is the last major strike rune, so I did get the extra bonus from it, since for a lot of items, if you get all the rune spots, you get an extra bonus, which is fantastic. One of the reasons why I made a custom deck for Kallari, even though I'm not that good with her, is because all the card packs that I've been opening, I've been getting a lot of corruption packs, because you get new cards for decks by using card packs. You get one by getting a hero to experience level 3, one for experience level 5, and one for 10.5 thousand reputation. So they have the orb here, which is very not good. The orb is definitely not good for us. since if somebody actually gets the orb to the location it's saying on the map, it's important because the orb gives bonuses depending on what you have in your deck. So when you make a deck for a certain hero, you are actually going to be choosing your orb prime buff. There are three. There is the Warlord, which gives you double physical damage, and all minions have triple physical damage. Oh, I'm sorry, they have a total of quadruple. They have plus 300% physical damage if you're near them with the OP buff, the Orb Prime buff. Then there's the Centurion. That gives 1,000 health to you, and I believe it's plus 500 health to any minions you're near, which again is really, really amazing. The final one is the Archmage, and it gives plus 100% energy damage. And with that, you also get, like, I believe it's ranged minion damage. Unfortunately, they got the orb there, and I knew that I wasn't going to get there in time, so I decided to take Sparrow out, so that way at least that could be stopped. I also wanted to go back to base, but I kind of derped out a little bit and didn't back on the Harvester, even though I was 2 inches away from the Harvester. Um, so that was a little bit of a mistake on my part, but I wanted to make sure that I defended base since 2 inhibitors are down now, and they have the Orb Prime buff. So my team's going really, really offensive, while we really should be defending the core since our core's already lost a quarter of its health. And this is really where the game, I mean, if you looking at the duration of the video, there's still actually 12 more minutes of this game. So it's actually still got a little bit more into it. Uh, I'm checking here to see if anybody's coming to help. It looks like Sparrow actually came to help with right lane, and I was like, yes, a carry to help me out with all this pushing. Since Kallari, as strong as she is, she can't hit the minions well from range. I mean, she can ult them, but then the ult's down, and someone like Sparrow or Murdoch, they're a lot better at taking out these super minion waves than Kallari is. Now, I snagged Blade of Agora in this case just because I wanted the extra crit damage. Because if you finish off a Blade of Agora, you actually get 50% more damage on a crit. So it turns 200% into 250%. There are other items that do this, like the Black Blood virus, I believe. Though I don't think that they can actually continue. I don't think that the crit bonuses stack. It does say it's a unique passive, so I believe it works the same way as it does in League of Legends in that you can't just get a bunch of items that give you crit bonus, stack them on top of each other, and then turn your 100 damage into 500 damage on each crit. Here's probably one of my favorite parts of this game, where the Kallari and I both ult each other at the same time, but I managed to live and she didn't. Because she was trying to stealth while she was rooted. I don't know why. Because if you're rooted and you stealth, it doesn't break the root. So I just stood there and kept hitting her. This is an example of how much damage Sparrow can do, considering she shot 4 times and managed to completely destroy Gideon. Which is just, and that's with his, if he has damage reduction. I actually have not tried Gideon yet, but if he does have damage reduction on his ultimate, then that just goes to show how ridiculous that damage actually gets. So I'm trying to go back here, since again the super minions and the fighting took me really, really low, and it'd be faster just to run than to back. I'm getting Major Strike, and I have just enough. I actually managed the game that I played before this one as Kallari. I ran out of runes for a certain type for the when I got to Blade of Agora, and I was like, oh well, there goes that crit bonus. But I remembered that and rearranged how I was gonna equip what runes where, and that gave me just enough strike runes compared to what I had to finish off the Blade of Agora. I have never actually gotten into a game that has been long enough for me to get every single item slot filled with an item. Now, to do that, you definitely have to have some serious, some seriously low cost runes and items, since you have a total of 60 points. So, let's say that if you don't have the health and mana potion, like if you sell those and get items, then if you were to get every single item completely ruined out, that would be a grand total of 24. So you would have 24 things to buy. So 6 items and then 18 runes if you wanted all of them to have their full rune bonus. So that means that you would have to have an average of just above 2 card points to actually get that. Now they tried to actually rush the core here. They tried to take it all out at the same time and just bum rush it. Murdoch got a fantastic ult that actually helped pick up some kills. So that's 3 of them down, and the Howitzer is trying to run away as much as he can, but unfortunately I'm not going to allow that. So I'm going to backflip. I actually can backflip forward, so it looks like I did just mess it up when I was talking about it earlier. And we managed to take Howitzer out. So now Gideon, who's pushing left lane again and distracting the Sparrow, we're going to be pushing up the mid lane this time, and we're going to be taking it out since currently our right inhibitor is back. And as I've said before, if the inhibitor respawns, then all the super minions that are currently in that lane die immediately. So you don't have to worry about the super minions that have already spawned but haven't quite gotten to the lane yet actually making an impact, since it makes sure that there isn't an impact. The inhibitor instantly kills it. Rampage does decide that he's just going to tank out that first tower in mid lane. So I decided, yeah, we can just keep pushing. And although Gideon ended up dying to Sparrow, I was going to try and help him out there. Help him out more so as in get revenge for him. Now, I did walk over the Harvester. I believe if you walk over a Harvester, even if you don't damage it, they can still see you. And that just goes to show how much Kallari's ultimate can do against a carry if you manage to hit it. Considering she was at about half health and that did all of it. It just took her straight out. Now here's Murdoch. There is no tower here, so they are fighting without a tower. And we're just trying to get as far as we can into this fight. I'm trying to get a little bit of peel from Murdoch here, since I know that he's one of our biggest damage dealers. He does get a pretty nice ult off on the Howitzer. Unfortunately, it was not enough to kill, but it did get him to about half health. He ults, and I figure he's going to be going backwards, so I get the dagger off on him, and then I just hit him, and he died in a couple of hits, which was actually pretty nice. Now, the Rampages are currently fighting each other, and they're trying to pick up that last kill. I'm trying to pick up the lane, push up the lane real quick, because I wanted to get that inhibitor. Once we could get that inhibitor, we were solid. Because even somebody like Rampage, with as much health and armor as he could have, he can't just tank an inhibitor forever. I mean, if you take more than 3 tower shots, even as a tank, you're going to be hurting a lot. So even though Kallari jumped here, Rampage did manage to hit her with a rock, which turned out pretty well. Uh, trying to dodge things like the boulders or Grux's little ground slam can be really, really difficult. So we took the left inhibitor. Now I wanted to attack the Murdoch wanted to attack the right inhibitor, right lane, and I was like, yeah, that can definitely work. But Orb Prime was also up at this point, and I figured that if anything, that left inhibitor makes it difficult for them to push out of that lane, which is always the side where Orb Prime is put. So I wanted to try and get as much as I could and see if I could manage to nab it and get that orb to the location. Because for blue team, what's currently blue team, the top left is always the spot where you're going to have to put the orb. And for orange team, what's currently the orange team, bottom left is the spot where you'll have to take it. Now I did sell my health potion here to actually pick up a lifesteal item and pick up some sinister drains. Now the reason why I did that was not just because I had the card points for it, but also because if I was going to solo Orb Prime, I wanted to make sure that I had the life steal to do it on my own. Because with somebody squishy like Kallari and all the damage that I do, that life steal is really, really helpful. And you'll see as I take Orb Prime, what you think would be really difficult, since he does have a lot of health, I just end up being able to sustain. I'm able to completely sustain. I'm able to heal myself entirely from almost every single hit that he has. Now, what Orb Prime's abilities particularly do aren't really shown very clearly, but I think that it's going to be pretty interesting. You might even have to give him a little bit of a buff unless they want to have him taken out that quickly. Because I'm just able to sustain myself at this point, and I can just wail on it forever. And the enemy team is focused on the rest of my team pushing mid lane to actually do anything. And Murdoch decided that he was going to help me out here. I was going to try and get that quick little. I decided to get the kill here, and Rampage shows up now. Now, the reason why I'm going to back here, if you try and recall with the orb, you drop it, and then the other, our Rampage picked it up. The reason why I wanted our Rampage to pick it up is because his leap, he has a leap ability, but he also has an ability where he roars and all his spines poke out, and then he can leap farther. In addition to that, if he ults, and that's where he gets really big, he has a different pounce. It's on a separate cooldown. So he could roar, leap, ult, leap, and it's really hard to stop that. It is incredibly hard to stop a Rampage who gets into the left lane near, like, if he comes right out of the jungle near that spot, then you can pretty much bet that Orb Prime is as good as done. It's really hard to catch him at this point. I don't know if they're going to make it so leaps don't work, but it also works if you're somebody like Kallari and the team has a Muriel who has the orb, because Muriel can ult on somebody and then she will take the orb with her, which I think is really interesting. Now, they're obviously trying to stop it here because they know that if we get Orb Prime, they're going to be in a really not a very happy situation. Even with Sparrow's ultimate, she is just not doing enough damage to Rampage to actually get him to care. But she did do quite a bit of damage to me, which is why I just sort of dodged out of that fight. I did want to get Howitzer, though, because again, this Howitzer was really intent on spending a lot of his mana, and he ran out of mana again, so I was more than happy to oblige him with a quick death. And he was at about 3/4 health whenever I ulted him. So Kallari's ultimate, I was doing about 1,300 damage with that ultimate, and that's even with armor taken into account. Granted, I have so much physical penetration, it was probably true damage anyway. I'm not sure if negative armor is calculated like it would be in something like Dota, but if negative armor is calculated, then that would definitely explain all the damage that I'm doing. Currently, we're just trying to finish off the game as quickly as we can. And there it is. We actually managed to turn that back from having 2 inhibitors down, and I think that it ended up turning out fantastic. It was a really fun game, and Kallari is very fun. Anyway, you guys go ahead and vote for who you want next week. If you liked it, like it. If you didn't like it, didn't like it. If you tell me why, I'd be greatly appreciated. If you need anything else, if you have any questions, just contact me. There are social media links below. Like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.